We are here for a new episode of our coffee break with the hospitality think tank. And today we're talking about how to reconcile people, planet, profit, and we can add purpose into that as well. I know that's something that actually for all the people here in this room, like virtual room, is important too. So, and we have a people from different places of the world today and very different expertise and areas of work. So that's great. I'm Celine Vadam. I'm the founder of We Think, and it's a consulting company focusing on wellness, and co-founder of the hospitality think tank with Willem here from Studio Puisto.
Hello.
And you're here with Sam-Erik, who's also from Studio Puisto, architect, interior designers based out of Finland.
Yeah,
And
nice to meet everybody.
You want to say a few words?
Sam-Erik, you go first.
No, you go first. You're older than me.
Yeah, I'm older than you. Willem van Bolderen, one of the founders of Studio Puisto Architects. We're based in Helsinki and we specialize in hospitality design, both master planning, architecture, and interior design. And this is Sam-Erik, colleague here, and a hotelier.
Yeah, I've been a hotelier for all my working life, and I've gone through different phases from being a trainee to employee to a manager to a regional vice president, and my latest chapter is joining Studio Puisto, which I'm very proud of, doing a part of the hospitality consultancy with the Studio Puisto team. So it's been a great ride so far.
And thank you. And we have Maribel out of Spain.
Hello, good afternoon.
Do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm the managing partner at the European Sustainable Hospitality Club. I also do research in academia, and I've been in sustainability for quite now some time. And I love, I'm also doing some new concepts, and I would say starting in the operator sort of world here in Barcelona and Girona and in Catalonia. So yes, very excited to be in the call and to share insights with you.
Great. And then we have Christopher, based in the US.
Hi, everybody. I'll say good morning. Some of you. Barcelona. I love Barcelona. Can't wait to get back sometime soon. I'm in Atlanta in the States. Recently left a firm called TVS. Many of you are familiar with them. I've worked with HKS. Right now I'm between positions, looking to join another group, another firm, architecture, interior design, sustainability. Someone who's really serious about making an impact in the world. More serious than the firms that I've been with.
Great. And we have Santiago out of the US, but doing a lot of work in Central and South America.
Thanks, Celine. Nice to meet everyone. Yes, I'm Santiago Ynigo, co-founder and CEO of Salva, advisory and asset management organization now with 5 active developments, all hospitality-oriented and impact-oriented. 2 in the Dominican Republic, 2 in Costa Rica, now 1 in Mexico. They vary in size and shape and how we are sustainable. One is a 16th century UNESCO protected building in the Zona Colonial of Santo Domingo, one of the first buildings there. So naturally we could only do so much in terms of sustainability, but now creating the extracurricular programs as to what we can do at a community level and environmental level, and then all the other ones are new builds, greenfields. First one's due to open this year. My background has been in accounting, so the notion of reconciling the accounts hit home for me on this call, on this theme, and since then I've been a managing director for a prefab housing company in New York. I was the head of development strategy innovation for Ceneva, which is a kind of owner-operator in Southeast Asia, for those that don't know it, one of the pioneers in sustainable tourism and luxury in the Maldives. So it's been nice to connect with Celine last year and align on our values, and yeah, excited to join the conversation.
Thank you. Well, as you're on, Santi, just a quick, as a way of introduction before going deep into the topic, because it's also something that we touched based on in previous conversation, like how do you see differences in between the regions you worked on? Because you worked on like different regions at different stages as well. What are the main differences in the approach and where each region is?
Yeah, absolutely. So as everyone I'm sure has gone through the process, each first off region and market jurisdiction has its own legal structure that is beneficial for investors, for the project. So already you have to structure the opportunity around that. Sustainability wise, you also have to structure your framework according to the needs, the environmental and the social needs of that area. So it's always a really incredible exercise in just understanding that, creating that benchmark, your chart of accounts, essentially your financial model around that, your triple bottom line. And yeah, so in Dominican Republic, we have two very unique projects. One I just explained is the boutique hotel opening this year. Next year, we have a project in the north, in the peninsula of Samana, in the area of Coson, Las Terrenas. It's a greenfield, so it was a much different process in how we structure the actual property ownership entity, the investment entity, and also understood what we could do from a real estate perspective. Accreditations were different, certifications around what we needed in terms of EDGE was one of the basic certifications that we decided to go for, and other certifications weren't very aligned for that project. And then yeah, it was a process of understanding which programs operated in the area, from a coral regeneration farm to a nonprofit school foundation that's going to work with us on the educational part. And there, the financial model is completely different because we're contributing land to these programs, and we're also structuring incentives around that. We're developing infrastructure for them to coexist with our operation. And so just from a structural perspective on the entities, we had to form a donor advised fund here in the US. Then we had to form a nonprofit over there, donate part of the land into that nonprofit so one of the foundations could operate from there. Also structure a way for our guests to be able to visit and take a part in educational experiences. So I think to answer your question, yeah, it just varies from project to project because you have to take into consideration so many different things, from the investment structure, the investors coming in, the bank that's actually providing the debt. And it's one of the biggest challenges, obviously, in building a sustainable property and one that's also wellness oriented, that everything is we're operating in peace and cohesion together. And so, yeah, and also in Mexico, it's been a really interesting process. I'm Mexican, and getting to understand the way things work there from a municipality level, state level in Nayarit. And it's very much about trying to be symbiotic with that area in many different ways, but it really does come down to the legal structure, in my opinion, and how you're able to take advantage of certain incentives if you do it this way, and that goes from a financial and sustainability perspective. So kind of reconciling the best way to do that is always on a case-by-case basis.
Hey, out of curiosity, a question related to that, because now, like in the beginning of the project, you kind of, before you start, you can set common goals, and that can be for the property owner, the operator, for staff, etc. But how do you prevent it growing apart? Let's say that in 10, 20 years, those goals are still common, or that you can kind of mitigate the risk of people growing apart, because that's typically what happens. Like, we all ambitious in the beginning, and then when projects proceed, some are less ambitious than others. Typically, money is less ambitious. How did you do you mitigate that risk?
Sure. Well, for one part, we're lucky because most of the sponsors and general partners we've worked with really are wanting to make this their evergreen. So we chose great partners from a kind of a foundational level that wanted to see that longer term vision come to life. Now, then you have to deal with the limited partners that come in and just are looking for that 5, 7, 10-year type of maximum investment horizon. So the way we structured it was obviously for that, and to also be able to convince them that, yes, even though we're structuring essentially entitled land infrastructure into these sustainable development programs, this is just making it more valuable and will make it more valuable over time. So the way we're actually doing it is by building these facilities that can host sustainable development programs. That way it can't really be removed. It's infrastructure. It's the next owner or investor's refinancing package that comes in is going to have to continue that progress, continue that program, whether it likes it or not. And for our investors, they also saw it as kind of a resilience strategic, kind of a risk management way of the fact that we can be self-sufficient on water, electricity, and have these types of programs existing from the property in a way that doesn't interfere with the money-making operation. For them was actually more of a risk mitigator in that this will be something of a stable operation for many years to come. And I can rely on it changing hands in 7 to 10 years. It won't affect my resale value. So that was kind of how we addressed it. We just are building these types of infrastructures. In the boutique hotel, we can't do much, but we do have a library. We're going to host programs for recycling and education, kind of this multi-formatted room where we can try to launch pilot programs for the Zona Colonial, which can then be replicated into the other areas of Santo Domingo. So that's kind of how we're going about it. And their solar water systems, we're working with a company from Germany actually, which is providing some very simple solutions, for the water inflow and the electricity inflow, the solar systems, and just tracking. Because a lot of that first step in sustainability is how to create that benchmark and tracking system for your property. So in that, we're just doing what we can,
No, because you were saying that a big part of it is legal, so I'm just wondering, like, is it also kind of partner agreements, or in a way that if you sell your shares, that the next one signs up to the same goals and ambition level as the previous owner, let's say?
Correct. I mean, you have a great point in that. Almost and part of EDGE and a lot of these certifications is a lot of just paperwork and making sure that every RFP, every partnership agreement in this process, there's clauses embedded in it where they are mandated to report a certain detail, or they're supposed to do a certain detail. So yes, refer to my Chief Sustainability Officer, Holly, which is great at that, and she keeps everything compliant. But yes, it does come down to the agreements that this is not just talking, they're walking their talk and being able to fulfill that mission, because they're legally bound to. And that's why we've chosen in general EDGE as a general start, a minimum criteria for our projects, because it is a little bit more flexible, or it's, I think for many, the most cost effective and pragmatic approach on the question of regulated sustainability. And then from there, you can do whatever you can for that specific case. But yeah, it needs to be embedded in legal agreements, and investors need to know obviously what those mandates are. But we haven't had an issue. I mean, fortunately, again, the investors that have put in money into our projects are all aligned on that mission. But yeah, hopefully that becomes a bit more mainstream, because that was a challenge, just finding those aligned investors.
Yeah, no, exactly, and no, because that's also like you often see like the problem that either the investor or the property owner has certain goals, or then the operator is more ambitious than the property owner, and then it's very hard to like who's bearing the cost, who gets also the marketing value of it, because that's of course a big part of it as well. So it's more interesting for the operator than for the property owner to move fast. And yeah, it's always interesting to hear like nice projects and to nice examples where from the start this has been embedded, because if you do it halfway the project, it's much harder to break those agreements or to renegotiate those agreements.
Yeah, but I'm also interested now, because we talk about the people, planet, and profit, and people is the part which I'm very passionate about. In the old days, when I was asked what is my definition of hospitality, it was the customer is king. But now my definition has changed over the years, that hospitality is community. And how do you engage with the community, and what kind of involvement do you bring community into these projects? Are there any things that you can share from your learnings and what you're doing, Santiago?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and a lot of it is really immersing yourself as much as possible in those communities. Not many developers or hotel investors have that luxury. You know, they just kind of have like an assembly line, and they just have to work with people who will tell them that. So if you really want to understand the needs of the community, specifically the social needs, you really have to immerse yourself, live it. And again, I'm very fortunate to have partners, general partners, sponsors who are living in these sites, not in the construction sites per se, but in the community, so they can really talk to what the social needs are there. There are other organizations that give like total impact assessments specific to, you know, the social needs of an area, so you can rely on a third party to tell you those needs in a more expedited way, because they have been present there for so many years. They have already identified a lot of the sustainable development programs. But, you know, in an ideal world, for example, in the project in Mexico, I've been 3 times now. It's in the Rivera Nayarit, just north of Puerto Vallarta. It's just a booming area, which is, you know, there's just a CNN article on the, you know, how the growth of it, and just the luxury brands that are all vying for specific project sites, new airport going up. And, you know, it's still in this very nascent stage. And I've been, Salva, my company's been engaged as an advisor to structure the entire deal, which is going to have 3 luxury hotels, very well-established brands that you'd all know, as well as 2 or 3 other smaller brands that are a bit more grassroots, let's say. And the 3 times I've gone, you know, because we are putting essentially for the sponsor GP options on a lot of different lands around us, getting to deal with the locals. And I have 2 weekends ago, I was there, Sunday of last weekend. I had to go, you know, present in front of the ejido, which is basically a remnant of Mexico's revolutionary past, which they gave a lot of land to ejidos, which are associations of farmers, people. And, you know, there's no better way to get to know the social needs, the community needs, than to go into these ejido meetings and literally hear it from them, their concerns about your project. They don't know what's going on. We're being very stealth, and like, you know, who are these Americans? They're so sketch. So, of course, the Americans hire the Americanized Mexican, me, to go in front of them and explain that, you know, it's in their best interest, the social needs, that first, you know, who am I to even tell them that? I need to understand from them. First thing I ask is, what do you all need? What would be your ideal vision of this, of your land that's been inherited to you for over 100 years now? And it provokes an incredible discussion. And like, you know, then it's like aligning realistic expectations, reconciling their expectations on like, okay, you're going to sell it. You have to sell it to a project that's aligned in your sustainability values, that wants to embed, give opportunities to your kids who have been receiving payouts of, you know, a collective agriculture, cycle every, year for the last 100 years more. So what it can do for their lives, how it can have that social impact. And it's incredible because these are people with a lot of principles. They don't have much, but they kind of command respect. And like, yeah, I have a very valuable piece of land. I could sell it to someone for $15 million. I could sell it to you for $5 million if you tell me you're going to do the right thing. So, it's always shocking to hear that. And I got to go meet with a holdout member of the Hilo and took me for a walk, and it was a really interesting experience. And so it's really about creating that dialogue, I would say, and understanding, from their perspective, what the social needs are, reconciling it to a point of like, this is the reality of the situation. In order for your project to be able to pay that amount for your land, they need to make this much money back. It's just basic, just common sense once you get down to it. And for them to understand that and to understand the types of project that's going to come in, what you're going to do for them, should it go through, that's where then in the agreement, do you mention that? Do you not? Obviously, you don't want to as a developer, just to not tie yourself to anything. But, you still have to respect it. Otherwise, they'll find a way to get to you, especially in these areas. So,
could they potentially also be a stakeholder or even shareholder in the project? Like
they want to. They would prefer to stay in as a equity, shareholder in the project.
In exchange for land, then,
even like you take 51% and acquire 51% at that market value or whatever value you agree on, and then 49% just to settle the concerns of any other investors who are going to be like, no, we don't want them to be a blocking force in this.
Yeah, so minority shares.
Yeah, and even then it can get concerning if they have any right to the land. Great, we're going to just take 49% of it, and that's it just generates a lot of concern for financiers for that they don't want that risk there. It's better to put them in the most feasible structure to make sure that they cannot impose your whatever is the final project design, and it's just one of those things you have to find a balance with and make sure that you don't shoot yourself in the foot for trying to be too nice. They can end up, a Hilo is like 100 people. One person, doesn't want to do something, and if they have the right and blocks it, then it can get messy. So you do have to be conscious of those things as a developer.
I think the social side, I believe, from the new developments or what you were expecting at the very earliest stages of concept development is quite clear. But I believe that the challenges appear, or most of the issues I see, is then in operations. So once the property is actually up and running, how you keep with their high rotation and how you keep educating people come and go, especially in our industry. So I don't know how are you dealing with it, but from my side, what I see most of the problems when we are talking about the strategy implementation is at the operational level, whether it's a greenfield or an operating asset, but it's just the changing of people, especially in leadership, and if it's not the right leadership, and how is the internal structure, technology not being used internally for internal comms. And I think that is where it gets messed up when we are discussing about reconciling profit, purpose, and planet, I guess, from my view.
And I guess to your point, Maribel, like it seemed that and Santi, you mentioned at some point, the creation of charities or foundation, and in urban environment, it seems to be the answer in brackets to the people side. So like for the environmental, like the planet side, there are a few things that operators are putting in place, but for the people side, like when you look at what is done, there are like a bunch of them who are okay, like let's give money to charity, or let's do charity work, and that's gonna tick the people box. And in certain places. So I had we collaborated last year to this book, like these critical questions in sustainability and hospitality, and in there we talk about this, the people, planet, profit. And there are some examples of Fox's Hotel in the UK and Plantation Villa in Sri Lanka, who focus on employing people with disability or disadvantages. They have also some radius of the property to hire locally. There's also companies like Sarah Hospitality who go into the market prior to hotel opening to train people, so local people don't only access the lower paid job, but they have training that give them access to, let's say, middle to even management positions. And I know that also some of the challenges, and maybe Maribel, because you're also in the academic side, you have some insight into that, but some of the feedback also and challenges for hospitality industry to involve more local people and have less turnover, and also better workforce available on the spot, is that hotel schools are generally private, expensive, and people who get out of hotel school, they expect more than what the industry is able to offer them at when they graduate, which creates a lot of them going to private equity or to developers, and these talents escaping from the operations, and also a disconnect from the reality of the local area and what people need in terms of employment in the local area, and how the hotels who are big employment generators, like a hotel as number of room times two, that's a lot of people that can be employed in the local area. So how do you see these or solutions to these problems?
So if I may say before that, in terms of regulation that you were mentioning before, I'm not so familiar with the US side of regulation, but in Europe with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, we have a huge framework of sustainability demands from the environmental and the social perspective. So now your suppliers' employers, you have to report about your suppliers' employees' working conditions, which is crazy, and it's just so much data we need actually in a daily basis that we don't have access yet. So it's not just how we treat our employees, the retention rates, how we educate them, how we engage them, all of that, but it's also how we go even further and outside our walls, the hotel walls, and what's happening there, because it's also in our scope, let's say. So it's really a challenge at the moment, one for hiring, for retention, for engaging and staff, but not just for that, but for the social criteria and data that we need for reporting. So for that specific regulation. So we have huge challenges now. And from the academia perspective, yes, we've seen a drop on new interest in tourism and hospitality management and hotel management in lately. And I believe it's because it's not perceived as a high quality education, like being an architect or being a science, or because it's not perceived, perception, I think, is been a massive challenge, but we are trying to change it. And there are smaller schools, online academies, and other things flourishing that I believe are supporting that, changing the perception. You can be a hotel manager, it's a great career. You can travel all over the world, like the big brands have always trying to push and show, you can do leadership and management development programs, and you can travel around the world, and you can gain insight about brand standards, and then you can have a large career in hospitality. It's not just you're going to do check-ins for all your life. But I believe that's changing the perception. It takes time, and we are there. I mean, obviously, for most of the brands I collaborate with, or I know, is they are struggling hiring at the moment. So I know it's still an issue, but I believe as we move forward, we are seeing ways to sort of engage. And again, is part of, if we are seeing this regulation, it will help us to sort of engage more and more with the communities and find ways to engage with local talent pools, to local activities that support, I don't know, to present your brand, to present the benefits of working with your brand. So I do see that, especially for sustainability oriented brands and conscious, because some of the younger generations want to work for this type of companies. They see cool companies like Ethos Hotels and some of these new coming brands. So I think the branding side is something that we can work on to retain and to attract.
Yeah, and that's also quite important. I mean, traditionally the hotel work has been a very hierarchical organization. I mean, the old ways have been thinking that it's like you have the general manager on the top, but he's a little bit distant to everybody. And he has to listen. He doesn't always listen to what's happening on the ground. And I think things are turning up, and also that how the leadership have to learn to understand that the generation that is now entering into the workforce, they will question decisions by the leadership, and they're not going to be willing to accept just some kind of be quiet and get on with your work, but actually has to clearly listen, to be show vulnerability in the sense of and be able to adjust to the way things are actually working these days.
And the great thing is technology is helping to make it sexier in a way, because from front desk, the PMSs are nicer than before. Like Opera used to be Microsoft. I don't know if you remember Marcia. I don't know if it's still in Marriott, but you know, you used to have these old PMS, these old systems, and now it's quite fun the way they are creating it. So I think that helps also to focus on the guest and not just being also in the checklist and the and the tasks, but you can make the experience like Santiago was saying, so we can have an experience with conservation, whatever, for a stay with a guest, and make it fun and make it like that the priority, not just to focus on step 1, step 2, step 3.
And also changing the name of the position from front desk clerk to customer experience agent.
Exactly, that helps. Absolutely, absolutely.
And also, you know, for like young people, like I always told my daughter, if you want to work as a waitress, you know, like outside of school, go into a hotel, because then you have like the structure of the hotel chain, you have some training, you have some career evolution, which you wouldn't have if you work in an independent restaurant. And I think this is something also that a lot of people don't really know or don't really see, and that the hospitality industry is maybe bad at promoting that. There's a bit like there's structure, but there's also more layers and career evolution perspective than equivalent like outlets, independent outlets.
But also beautiful about this our industry is that it's an opportunity for multi-generational careers. I mean, after all, the generation now is going to live much longer than ever before. And what used to be somebody who's just retiring and never work again, they actually are still very active working in the hotel. So it's an opportunity to see 4 generations working in the same place and learning from each other.
Absolutely.
Would you say that in general, because we talked about people and planets, the weight between people and planets is still not balanced, and that planet is still the more like marketed side of sustainability, or like the people aspect is growing as well and becoming more prevalent? Because from at least in terms of you know, like greenwashing and like communication, there's a lot of focus on the planet side, but we hear less, I think, from about the people side and what is done from a people perspective and wellness of the employees and the guests. Like wellness is growing, but still there's it seems that it's less,
Could it also be
less sexy than the planet thing.
Yeah, but is it kind of because it's less sexy, or because it's harder to monitor? Because with the climate, we found like, well, CO2 is basically how we measure everything, and it's easy to put a number on progress. You did better than last year because you reduced emissions by this much. So it's very easy to track, although arguably CO2 is limited in tracking all kind of initiatives. For example, it doesn't track biodiversity or other elements. But with people, it's much harder because the markets are really different. Poverty, for example, it's also really different what it means in different places. So like is the tracking the issue, or is kind of the that it doesn't get enough attention?
Yeah, I believe there's a misconception because you cannot separate. So all environmental actions have a social impact, and all social impact has an environmental action. So I think there's a lack of education there in terms of what metrics do I use, and how do I calculate, like what formulas, what math I use to actually measure it. So CO2 perhaps is quite like you can measure water usage. There are so many things we can use very easy with building management systems. It's even easier. But I believe that the social impact and how it translates into environmental impact, I think we're still having a gap there of how we measure it. We have some metrics. I think that how it's called, the United Nations Sustainable Development Performance Indicators. They have some formulas that you can apply, and I've used that in the past because they have a contextual it's context-based indicators. So you have you can actually input what's happening in your development, in your location, very context-based, because as Santiago was saying, it really depends on the development, the location, and the project. So I think those indicators are quite good for the measurements, but we are lacking the intersection and the exactly manner of how to translate the impacts and the relationship between one thing and another thing. The easiest way, in my opinion, is to see the gender equality. So gender equality and land conservation. So if you impact or improve the rights of women's rights in a destination by preserving land, you have two good potential good impacts. You're preserving land and you're improving equity and gender equality within a project. But involving hotels, I think it costs to see which initiatives that the hotel or the hotel chain has that actually have both impacts and how you measure it. So we're still not there, I guess.
And I think that there are also simple KPIs like a rotation, like rotation rate, retention rate, and the percentage of local people employed that are quite easy to track and use, but are not really published or made available. Or you were mentioning gender equality, like counting how many men and women are working in the hotel and in which department is also something quite easy to get. And what are their nationalities, or are they living locally, or are they coming from far? Are they expats or local people? These are things that are easily trackable, but that are not like popularly communicated on.
Yeah, or maybe they don't want to, because if you saved 100 kilos of CO2 or a ton of CO2, that's something that you maybe want to boost about, but that you went from 5% gender equality to 15, that's maybe still something you won't put in your report. So only once you hit 50, maybe you want to talk about it. So maybe the moment you want to share that, or the same as, for example, with education, that's something for the long run that maybe only pays itself back in 5 to 10 years, when you can actually start reporting, or of course you can report much earlier, and companies should be forced to report much earlier, but they only want to maybe talk about it from their own initiative once it's kind of positive rather than harmful. And that's unfortunate, but with CO2 you can always do better than last year in a way. When a company emitted more CO2, they also won't talk about that anymore. I think that only when it got better.
Is it also like a question of guest education? Like, like now when you go to a hotel, you can look at, do they have a recycling program? Do they use plastic bottle or whatever? And like now, and guests are choosing where they are staying based on these criteria. But our guests at the stage now to say, okay, I'm going to this hotel because they employ local people, because they employ disabled people, because they employ, I don't know, like there's gender equality in this property. Like, are we, from a guest perspective, are we in a stage, or actually, like, is it something that hotel chains think that might at the reverse be bad marketing? Like, if like the perception, if we are served by disabled people, maybe the service won't be as good, or like
bias,
maybe there's some education to do also from that perspective.
Yeah.
The corporate client definitely is asking for that. So the RFPs from the corporates, yes. So the guest, the B2C, I won't say, but B2B definitely already asking for social criteria to sign big contracts, especially for multinationals. Again, because they have to report. I don't know if it's because they is their purpose or just because they have to comply with the regulation. But I've seen RFPs that are already requesting social data and governance structures, like how do you organize yourself, what's the reporting like, what's the regulation gap analysis that you've got, what are the, like, I've seen that. But maybe from the guest, like individual, couple, solo traveler, whatever, I don't believe we are there yet. So it's more the common sense, like how you treat local communities. If you recycle, you don't have plastic. So I don't think we have that much of the vision of what sustainability actually means from maybe the educated one, but I don't know.
And unfortunately, like, of course, we only focus on the stuff that we see. So the plastic is visible, but that's just a really tiny bit of the impact that we can make. So also, how much can we demand the guest to kind of educate themselves into everything, to ask the right questions? Like, you in a way want either the government or the mother company, or then other certification to kind of help make that decision for you, because otherwise we might focus on the wrong things. That something that seems good might do more harm in the long run, or vice versa. So there's so much stuff that we are still figuring out every day that you thought was a positive thing and turned out being a bad thing. So I don't know, some standardization there would be good. And maybe indeed, like when we talk about planets, there is more standardization, where some people, it's fairly local still, which is probably a good thing, but that makes it harder to track and make kind of the right decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one thing that comes with standardization, and we talked about it last time, is that once you, like I think Maribel just mentioned it as well, that if you ask that you're not only responsible for your own employees, but also of the employees of your suppliers. So basically you have to track that as well, which is of course a good thing. That means that you have to work with reliable suppliers, but it also means that you tend to go with the suppliers that have an HR department and that are able to kind of put all these things into place. And that might, for example, be a negative effect, that it might be good to get your vegetables from the local farmer who was not able to report all that stuff, and then or might have a, I don't know, illegal immigrant working for him or her, and then you might be supporting the wrong people, or it's an incentive to bigger corporations rather than to the smaller ones. And then the kind of grassroots hospitality might be in a disadvantage, and that's really clearly visible also in the construction industry, that because of the reporting of the materials that are used and the components that you used, it's the big ones that can get the certification for their components. So then your local carpenter is not able to compete, because basically in the calculation they get a 25% penalty because they cannot supply all the documents. This is just on the side note, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess if you include also construction in the process, that's also become even more complicated for the people aspect, like gender equality in construction, and employing disabled people, employing local people. Like there's a lot of if you really want to put the people aspect in from the beginning of the cycle of the property to the end, like full cycle, it's it's even harder.
Yeah, and can we also demand that from companies to kind of course, we should all have the interest to do so, but like it's super complicated because then suddenly, like if it's a 2-man show or a 10-man show, like can you do all the due diligence? And of course, there's big parts of the world where regulations handle this for you, but especially on the parts where the community is more vulnerable, of course, then it's up to the client or the developer to do the due diligence. But yeah, it's a good question where to like whose responsibility, like where does it belong and who should be ultimately responsible for it?
Well, the customer also will make a decision because they will stay in a hotel where the hotel is embracing the employees, embracing the people, and they feel that. I mean, if I stay in a hotel and I talk to one of the employees and I found out that he's from the person is from the local community, I think that makes the totally a different experience because they can share a lot of things that I would not ever find out about the place in other ways. So I think there's a strong argument that the interest of the hotel is to really hire and educate and bring up the people from the community into that hotel.
Mm-hmm. And I guess
it's not a new concept, hiring local people. I mean, Izzy Stark in his Four Seasons book talked about that 20 years ago. The benefits of it, and he really listed pretty specifically the potential benefits of going that route. Guided by the trained people, the people who actually know the hospitality business, of course.
Yeah.
Loading up on as much local talent as you can. The biggest benefit being retention. They're not going anywhere. They're not looking for that next step on the ladder that will take them to the next resort and the next or the next hotel and the next hotel. Get some investment, local investment.
Yeah, and one thing, of course, now we're talking about workers, but you could also argue that most hotel brands are in urbanized areas and they run a resort in either in a foreign country or then in the countryside. So basically, that means that the company is always based elsewhere and they might hire local people. But what about brands that are kind of actually sprung up in the rural areas or are built locally, like in places that are unvisited or like and I think in that sense we are good living in a super nice day and age because it's so much easier now to kind of start your own brand or to start an alternative or to become an operator because there's the booking platforms that can help you. Like it's much easier to start nowadays and to be a true alternative to globalized players in a way. So but I don't think there's too many big brands that really started locally or that are really like from areas where the chances were smaller to succeed, let's say.
And you have the seasonality factor as well. Like when you have this brand operating seasonal properties, this is not sustainable also in terms of employment for the local population. And you have this influx of external people coming to work for a few months, and then everybody's out, and the place is like in certain areas is really shutting down. Like and so for the local life, not only the local people, but like local life in general is very damageable.
You have to build that in. Those people doing in the off season, build it in somehow, or at least build in that understanding. It's still very good for the local economies, for the local, just the good of the towns, the cities, because you're training people who otherwise might not get that education, that training. And you're talking about growing hospitality brand, growing a hotel within that region. You know, it's those people that you trained that are going to go and open that local hotel actually. So will that be a competition, or are they growing the sort of ecology, the economy of the area? It's really very beneficial in so many ways. Get the local people involved.
Yeah, but in that case, like, and I see it here, like in Azores, like people get trained and then they leave and they go working in places where they can have a sustainable work for the full year and not just a few months of the year. So like all these talents are like leaving the local areas.
But this is changing because of the weather is changing as well. As the
Mhm.
weather changes, the properties will have to manage and adapt, as we are seeing here in, especially in Southern European countries. Like we have hotels used to be 6 months, now they are 9. They are longer, 9, 10, 10, even 10 months operations. So it's changing. So it's
And Celine is a good
a-
example. Like it's talent that moved to the Seychelles, Celine. So it's not only people moving away from there.
Yes.
And I guess partly for the weather as well, no?
The weather, yeah. Well, the weather is, like the weather is great even now. Like it's a really beautiful and sunny day. But I guess also like that's also where being, and going back to Santiago's initial point about involving the local community from the beginning and checking what their needs are is important to go like full circle, because then in months where the weather is maybe not as attractive for tourists, or even the connection, like one of the big issue during lower season months is that you don't have direct flights to go to these places. And what is like, and but the local life is still continuing, and maybe that's where, and we've seen that like when I was at Four Seasons, we did a lot of work on that, on seasonality and how to extend the seasons, etc. And to Maribel's point, we had properties that really increased the seasonality and added like 3 more months on the season, sometimes even more. And that also went to how do you involve the local population, how do you create things for like the local, like keeping your restaurants open, maybe like and having flexibility in your buildings, in your property, so you don't have to have the full thing open, but at least you have like enough open to sustain the local employees, the local community, organizing events, working with the local corporate companies to do events or things like that, and and yeah, like being flexible and seeing the hotel again, like we talked last time about the life cycle of the assets from like timeline perspective, from the like through the change of owners or the change of operators, but you have also this over cycle, this seasonal cycle, and how the property changes throughout the seasons. And like how do you, like we had this like word, the winterization of the hotel during the colder months. And so how do you adapt and have a hotel that's not just like a fixed asset, that it's like that, but having it really like change and evolve throughout to have like a longer opening, a longer, make the most of every cycle of its life.
Yeah, but that you only get, like, because of course in reality most of the focus is still on the third P, the profit part. So if there's no financial incentive, not too many will do it voluntarily unless they really like for a local community. So I think that's why Santi's suggestion of having them as having the local community as a stakeholder, for them there's a real also profit incentive to, for example, operate it all year round if that was the case, if there was a low season. So I think by taking all the stakeholders serious, taking them serious, having them also share in the profit, then you get something where you look for something that works best for all, because otherwise it's just easier to take the money out, bring it back home, and leave the community to hang for a little while. Like so. The P is of course still in most corporations it's the ultimate number under at the bottom line is the profit, and how to ensure that those all three are in balance and that all stakeholders benefit.
And in certain places, like closing the hotel, it's the more profitable solution. But now, like I've seen in certain places where it's difficult to find workforce, actually, like they found that having to retrain people and like start the process a few months prior to the reopening, etc., was actually heavier on everything than just than closing the hotel. And that's also how like maybe they close now only for 1 month, where people get their holidays all in one go, like close for 1 month for 2 months, and so they can keep this this year-round 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 infrastructure going.
It's a win-win. The employees and the owners.
Yeah. In theory.
Yeah.
Well, great. Anyone wants to have a last word before we close this call? No.
Well,
Okay.
Celine, you've heard me say this before, and it's interesting I continue to see this duality of people, planet, and I never really see it phrased, people versus planet, but I think that it's that way in a lot of people's mind. And I think it would go a long way if we all would stop thinking of it in terms of a duality, people and planet. It's people and planet. And frankly, when it's not about saving the planet, I'm getting on my big picture high horse here. It's not about saving the planet. The planet, after it does away with us, is going to be just fine.
Saving ourselves.
Yeah.
It's about saving ourselves. And maybe that would hit at home a little more solidly for people if they really started thinking of it in terms of, it's not about the planet, it's about you and your kids and your grandchildren. What are we doing to keep this world a livable place for ourselves? Big picture.
Yeah, no, just to chip in on that, because people, planet, profit. So it also seems that profit is the only one that makes money, but in a way we're living on credit with the environment in a way. So all the damage that we do, it's just something that we don't pay for at the moment, and the same arguably goes for people as well, because you're doing true harm if you don't do it well. So you can put a price on it, but we should in a way put a price on it, because that would be kind of the ultimate way how you could measure all three.
And we pay for it, but we pay with our health. I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for this interesting conversation. And we'll see you next month for another conversation. I don't remember the topic for next month. Let me just check that. Oh yeah, what are the touch points for a holistic wellness approach in hotels? So see you then. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks,
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.